Hi, and welcome to this special episode of the OrgDev podcast. So, how do you break into the field of organization development and design? Dani and I have the privilege of sitting down with 33 accomplished practitioners, thinkers, authors, and academics from some of the most innovative and influential organizations in the world. These include Amazon, Netflix, the NHS, Accenture, Intel, House of Commons, Roffey Park, and many, many more. So we've sat down and we've identified from the interviews the top 10 tips for getting started in organization development. So whether you're an internal HR professional who's keen to get started, an aspiring OD consultant, or you're just someone who's passionate about shaping organization culture and effectiveness, these tips are for you. Our 33 practitioners from the US and Europe have come from a whole range of fields, from chemists to journalists to engineers and HR business partners. There is no one way to become an OD practitioner, but there are some essential principles to follow. Dani and I hope you enjoy these tips as much as we've enjoyed interviewing these brilliant people. And Dani and I want to take this opportunity to thank all of our guests for being so generous with their time, their expertise, and their insights. And we also want to thank our growing community of subscribers for all your support so far. We couldn't do it without you. And if you're watching this video and you haven't subscribed, then please do, because we have a video coming out with a brilliant interview every single week. We're already gearing up for season 3 coming out in September, and we have some brilliant guests lined up from across the world, which I'm sure you'll enjoy. So enjoy the top 10 tips, and if you have any comments, please leave them in the chat.
I would recommend to anyone thinking about getting into OD, seek out a change project. That is where you will cut your teeth. And there are change projects running all the times in organizations. So, and particularly any change project that requires collaboration with different functions. So as soon as you have to knit together different parts of the business, IT, finance, legal, HR, commercial, whatever it is, get involved in a project of that nature and keep volunteering for those projects, because that will give you really valuable experience about what does and doesn't work in change, which is in essence what OD is. OD is about promoting a change in the system for the good of the system. So that would be the practical experience that I would say if you're right at the beginning of starting out, is find a change project to volunteer on. I think the CIPD does a foundation certificate or similar in OD. You probably know better than I, Garin. But doing something like that to get your formal OD underpinning would be really helpful as well. And then hopefully between those two things, then you could start to find different ways to get in. And final top tip is, if you are in HR, I think there are often change jobs that are in business functions that are given a different name. So also consider going for one of those types of jobs to give you a different experience and to really experience the accountability of driving a change.
Be a lot more patient than I was. That's the fundamental advice. I think what we're doing in our respective circles is trying to lower the barrier to entry to a very, very difficult field. If we think about how this field grew in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, there weren't many master's programs, but there were a lot of good people doing good work who you could apprentice with, really with no understanding at all of the field. You met them, they liked you, and all of a sudden you had a job with a living wage doing the work, and you learned on the job, and you were taught by people who had been there since the beginning, who knew Kurtlu. And that doesn't exist in the way it used to. We went in, we kind of swung as a field into really codifying this into master's programs. And at least in the United States now, a lot of those master's programs, we're losing a lot of that. So there's this huge gap where I'm thinking that apprenticeship needs to come back, or we need a new model. So I would say the best way to grow in this field is to learn from someone who's doing the work, and is to do the work as much as you can. It's a field where the unfortunate saying is you need experience to get experience. And so the way to get experience is to try it out. My first OD gig was calling my university and saying, I'm trying this out. Would you like it for one of some of your student groups? And they said, sure. And I think it was a total flop. But boy, did I learn and have something under my belt that I could talk about at my first job interview. So there's a quality of getting out there and doing it that I think, don't wait for permission, but also know that it takes a long time to learn this, and that the ways of learning are changing in our field. So I think be patient, be engaged is the best advice I have. I was very impatient. I thought I should be able to do this work without even a master's. And then I started my master's and I thought, what was I thinking?
Get a mentor, find a mentor if you don't have one already. There was a really interesting study, I think it was from about 2019, 2018, that looked at the impact of mentoring on those starting out in their OD career. And it found that mentoring had the biggest impact. So find a mentor. If there's somebody in your organisation who's more experienced around OD, reach out to them. If maybe you're a little bit alone in your organisation, you can reach out to Dani and Garin because they'll be maybe able to introduce you to all the wonderful people they know. So yeah, finding a mentor. I think go on some kind of training and development. So think about all the things you'd like to learn and the best ways for you to learn that. So there might be some techniques such as T groups, for example, or appreciative inquiry, where you might want to go on a course. There might be other things where it's okay just to read or watch videos. But again, a bit like what I was talking about earlier, have your own little what I don't know book and just kind of keep a note of that. And that's also a really good way of tracking your progress. Become part of a professional network. So there's all sorts of great OD networks out there, and I'd encourage you to join one of those if you're not joined up to those already. And again, a great way to learn, a great way to build relationships. And we know a really important thing at the heart of good OD is relationships. It's about people.
I think first and foremost, just be curious. That's the biggest thing. And apply quite a critical thinking lens. Always ask the question why, or what is this there to serve? Never be satisfied with the answer you get first time round, because inevitably there's an answer that goes behind it. Follow your nose in some instances and follow your instincts, because I think a bit to the agile space, that there are different schools of thought in the OD world, and some you will lean to more than others. That's not to say the others are wrong by any stretch. That's just a position people take. But again, from a curiosity perspective, I think there was something that definitely resonated when I started, I guess particularly masters at Roffey Park, of different schools of thinking, which just opens your eyes up to different constructs, and then challenging those constructs, because just because someone's written about them doesn't mean they're right, per se. And I think that all in the context of, if people are interested in creating great working environments that offer real value for people in terms of how they see themselves fitting into an organization, how do you create optimal organizations that allow those people to fit in them, then I think, whether OD is formally in your title or not doesn't necessarily matter, because a bit like I said, I think I was doing that stuff and didn't know until someone told me that there's this field called organization development. And I wouldn't let that prohibit you. I think it's, be curious first and foremost. And it's amazing where just asking some questions can sometimes lead you.
Embrace change. I mean, it's cliche, but it's the world is changing at a more rapid pace. I don't see that shifting back. I think that's the world we're in. When I got started in the field, we talked a lot about change interventions, and we talked about structured change strategies, and they were like these events and whatnot. And I think how things have shifted over time is that we're in a situation now where it's more like constant. So it's not an individual change intervention. It's not an individual, like, distinct change event. Like, we're talking about constant change culture, fostering constant willingness and openness to learning, growth, and pivoting and shifting and being agile. So for any change practitioner in this day and age, I think you have to approach it that way, to help organizations really stay at the forefront of where they need to be. I think long past are the days where we can just have like our rolling 5-year plan strategy, where we can like go into our map out this 2-year intervention and then like set it in stone and then move forward. Like that, it just doesn't work. It may not have ever worked as well as we thought it did, 10, 20 years ago, but it certainly doesn't work now. And so just stay curious, continually ask questions, challenge assumptions, I teach my students lots of different theories, lots of different models, lots of different practices, those sorts of things. But honestly, they're going to forget the vast majority of that stuff. What I really want them to come away with is like a heightened comfort level with ambiguity, complexity, and just an innate curiosity. If they have those things, I think they'll find success. If they don't have those things, no matter how much knowledge they have up in their heads, they're probably going to get short-circuited at some point in time.
So I think having curiosity around the operating system is the main thing. So kind of going a level deeper in terms of the frustrations that you are feeling at work or seeing in an organization, the kind of surface level stuff of what's going on. Oh, Sally and Bill, they don't get along. And asking yourself, like, well, what is happening at the OS level that is creating the dynamic where Sally and Bill don't get along, or where every meeting feels exactly the same, or whatever the tension is that you're feeling. Starting to develop the ability to go a level or 2 levels or 3 levels deeper to try to understand what is happening, I think is huge for internal practitioners, for external practitioners. That's the main thing. And then I guess the other kind of more practical thing is that I do think this work requires facilitation skills, conversation skills that I think you only really develop, unless you're really lucky and you just are intrinsically good at it, you only develop through practice. So learning, putting yourself in contexts where you get to practice facilitating, practicing holding a structure for a group to have a conversation. I think that can only help you if you're interested in doing more work like this. And I think there's probably all sorts of, external trainings to explore. I have never really done one. My external training was becoming a teacher in undergrad. Like once you've gone through student teaching, you can like handle any sort of organizational environment. So I don't know that I would recommend that as the most direct approach. There's probably better ways, but it's primarily a rep-based game. Just getting those reps, being in that kind of facilitator role is really valuable.
I would start with a good old self-reflection, and I think, and kind of the idea of the use of self and that you as an instrument, what it is. What is that instrument? What is it that you bring and, want to do, and, where you want to make a difference? What's your take on things? Those are kind of the important things I would, and what's kind of what ticks you? What are the things that you get out of it as well? And being kind of clear, kind of what is the purpose you're serving when you go into a client system, or whether you are going internally, sort of what are some of the things that you would want to get out of it, and clarifying that for yourself. I think that's where I would start. The tools and techniques will come. Being kind of working with yourself first, I think, is always important in leadership.
It's a step that it's easy to miss, but it's fundamental, isn't it?
Yes, and it's a never ending. I mean, like I'm probably still, doing good old reflection. It's always there, and it's hard work, but it's so worth it, because I think the clearer you are yourself about why you're doing what you're doing and what is this thing that you are doing, it's just easy. And I find it always saying, there's tools and techniques, but the way you use them depends on who you are and what you think, what's your idea, what's your belief, and so forth.
Start with as much as you can to develop your own identity and your own sense of self, and really getting to understand yourself, and then begin to build onto that understanding. How are you in other contexts? What are you like in a hierarchical relationship? What are you like in a team relationship? Become aware of the role you play, which, to get really psychological about this, becoming interested in the role you played in your family of origin, and how is that role you played in your family of origin beginning to play itself out in the role you now play yourself in at work? Are you the one who placates and helps and keeps everybody happy, or are you the one who is happy to cause trouble or be the rebel or whatever it might be that you find yourself in roles on? 2 stages, I guess, of beginning to grow awareness and development. The third stage, and this becomes a lifelong job, is noticing then, where do you find yourself in the wider system? What roles are you playing there, and what roles are others playing there? And we've spoken during this dialogue about the system forces that can sway you and take you, to really discover when is that happening you, and how are you caught in it, and what do you need to do to become detached and step back again. I mean, that's master practitioner level stuff, but if someone early on is aware of that those phenomena exist and can start to become curious about them, identify them, and then do anything that it'll take to develop learning. Even I remember joining Toastmasters years ago. That was a super thing. I remember having a voice coach, which I thought, gosh, that's ridiculous. Why would I have that? That was pre-joining Fred and Carolyn, and I think maybe might have helped get the job. So do whatever it takes to self-develop, but not in isolation, in the context of everything else around us.
Develop a systems thinking perspective, whether you want to call it a more holistic view of the organization, whether you want to think about it just big picture. But for me, OD is not in the details of a better performance appraisal. It's really thinking systemically. What are we really trying to drive here in the organization with performance appraisals? And how can we do that in a way that doesn't inadvertently actually hinder the very impact that we want to have, where people get all tied up in, did I get a 3.4 rating or a 3.42 rating? You can lose the whole thread if you're not careful. So really developing a more holistic or systems thinking approach. And I guess thinking about, don't just organize or streamline the work of the organization. How can you have not a 10% impact on the organization, but a 10x impact on your organization? How can you really help the organization transform or revolutionize or evolve what it does and how it does it?
Can systems thinking be learned? Or are some people just innate systems thinkers, they can just see it? Or can people actually learn how to be good systems thinkers?
That's a really good question that I think I need to think about a little bit, but I'll give you my off the cuff answer, and then I'm going to probably think about this after this call is over. It's a very provocative question. I think, like with many things, whether it be athletics or a particular field of study, some people are going to come to it easier. You could even look at whether it's DISC or Myers-Briggs or something like that, and say, for example, someone has a preference for intuition versus sensing in the Myers-Briggs world. It's my understanding from Myers-Briggs that intuition, people with that preference tend to see patterns and tend to think more systemically, naturally. But I've also, over the course of my career, met incredibly brilliant OD practitioners that have a clear preference for sensing as well. So I guess, in my view, it can be learned. There might be some people that are more naturally predisposed to think and act that way than others. But I also would say that I'm really encouraged by 2 things that I've seen change over the last, I would say, 10 to 15 years, which it used to be when I was talking to organizations about systemic thinking, it was usually the C-suite executives or maybe the head of training or leadership development or something like that I was having the conversation with. And the rest of the organization, it was kind of a either irrelevant concept or something of not great interest to them. Increasingly, I've seen more and more people at line leadership levels, not just in senior levels, really thinking and working systemically. And I think people are just getting more attuned to the fact that a lot of things are baked into the systems and our way of doing and thinking about things. And that to really affect complex systems, you need to think systemically. So I think it's becoming more prevalent and more broad-based, I guess I would say.
You've got the ultimate story of there are no barriers, that if it's something that you really want to do, you can achieve it in terms of getting where you want career aspirationally. What advice would you give someone who's starting out now? So maybe someone who's considering a career in OD, intrigued by systems thinking and building into their practice, or even they might be an HR, they might be a social worker, they might be a soldier, but they're looking at this. What advice would you give to them just starting out?
I think breadth. So, read. I think reading's pretty underrated a lot of time. Same for the bloke who didn't read his first book till he's 27. But read and research in that area as much as you can, and then go find a mentor. Reach out and to don't be afraid to make connections, because I think that's when I first came out of the military. I had no connections in thing. I still look now and think my network's probably quite slim, but I would reach out and go find some good people that you can have a conversation with. Be curious and answer those questions, and don't take everything as sort of binary. Look for themes about what's happening, and then go explore what's missing. So what's the difference? And I think that's real key. So look what everyone's saying and find out what's the difference.
Definitely, and don't give up.
Definitely don't give up. Yeah. And that's true, because I remember I still do it now. I'm human. I'll sit there and I'll doubt myself all the time, and I think that's healthy in a way sometimes. It's not doing too much, because it keeps you on the edge, and with the edge it gives me that thirst then to learn, and I think that's a healthy boundary of doubting yourself enough that you still remain curious. I don't ever want to be in that position where I think I know it all, and I think that's probably good advice for people, is that you're never going to know it all. You don't need to know it all, but just keep being curious to try and think that there's some book that's going to give you the answer, and then go find the other book that you think is going to give you the answer, and that gives you that drive to keep reading and keep exploring different ideas. So that's crucial.